My name is Elissa Freiha. I'm the General Manager of Snapchat in the Middle East. And welcome to the first episode of Positive Disruptors, a video series that's focused on meeting and getting to know industry personalities that either disrupted or in the process of disrupting their industries. Today, we're focused on a very important topic, women's empowerment and gender equality in our industry. I'm joined by Elissa Freiha, the founder of WOMENA, one of the largest media companies in the region that is focused on creating the most compelling and inspiring female-focused content that is aimed at accelerating diversity and equality. Welcome, Elissa, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's amazing to hear somebody else explain WOMENA so well.
It's really inspiring. So when I was preparing for this, it actually struck me that you decided really early on in your career to focus on such an important topic, yet very complex, at that stage of your life.
Yeah.
Can you tell us that story and how WOMENA happened and how it went from that time till it is today?
Yeah. Well, interestingly enough, I moved to Dubai right out of university and I wanted to start a business. I was really into entrepreneurship, but I wasn't very aware of the current state of women's affairs and women's rights in the world. I think I grew up in France and I had this kind of misconceived notion that equality had already been achieved and feminism was a thing that happened in the 70s. And very quickly, I realized how misinformed I really was. So in starting WOMENA, we were targeting investors and entrepreneurs, trying to build the ecosystem and female representation in the entrepreneurial ecosystem back in 2013, where there weren't very many women involved. And just through that exposure, I started researching more and more and understanding actually what the reality is for women across the world, whether it's in Europe, in the US, in the Middle East, in Africa, in Asia. You saw that there was mass inequality in pretty much every sector and every social aspect of their lives. And this kind of blew my mind. And I became so passionate about getting involved and changing it, that it pretty much like took over my life. It became my purpose.
And then you founded WOMENA.
And I founded WOMENA. I mean, this was in my time at WOMENA. At first, it was really just we saw it as a business opportunity. We saw targeting female investors and working with entrepreneurs as a business opportunity that was not yet met, that we as young women could service. And in doing that work, I was learning so much about the reality of women's situation that I kept thinking, I have to do more, I have to do more, I have to do more. And as my team grew, then our ambitions grew and created kind of the WOMENA that is today, which is so much more exciting, I think.
And it's extremely inspiring. You said something that resonated really well with me. What we're trying to achieve here is really simple.
Yeah.
So let's just have equality. But it's extremely obvious that doing that is complex. Mm-hmm. It has to be mindset changes. It has to be, there are a lot of people that has to do a lot of things for that to happen. Now, let's take UAE as an example. You have a government that has been really focused on this topic and actually making lots of progress in this area. 57.5% of women have opportunities now in the workforce. And that's the highest in the region and a major progress in this area. Actually, if you look at the forecast till 2030, the number of jobs available to women in industries like tech and online digital platforms and others are going to double. Mm-hmm. So you have a government that is focused on this. There's obviously a role for businesses and corporations, and there's roles for people, mm-hmm. business executives and people in general. Let's talk about businesses, like observing and you being part of that ecosystem. What do you think is the role of businesses in the short term to create really quick wins that incentivize everybody to believe that actually we can do it?
Well, first and foremost, I think representation is really important. So there might not be as many high achieving women in publicly seen roles, for example, in the private sector, like you do have in the public sector in the UAE. And so there isn't as much of a vote of confidence towards recruiting more women, or maybe even communicating that those companies are friendly towards the needs of female employees. Now, equality does not mean not acknowledging a difference, because in society, there's still expectations of women to fulfill certain roles at home and outside of the workplace. So the most important things that a company can do, that private businesses can do, is really look at the rules that they have in place and see what can they change to kind of cater to the added pressures that women in the workforce tend to have to face. And a lot of that is flexible working hours or remote working from home. Now, after the pandemic, you're seeing that a lot of young millennials, especially new mothers, don't want to have to go back to an office life that requires them to be there 5 days a week. So communicating that, not just having an internal policy, but actually being able to tell everybody that you're open for flexible hours, you're open for remote working, that you have other creative policies like extended maternity leave or even paternity leave or parental days. So days that are no questions asked, that parents can take if they have a requirement to take care of their child down the line.
That's great. Like, let's take that as an example. So the specific things you just mentioned that could be very quick wins. What do you think are the barriers for businesses to actually do that? That's a decision you make as a business. There's obviously a lot of kind of operational impact there. But just observing this from kind of a bird's eye, what do you think are the key barriers that's not allowing them to do this as fast?
There are two main elements. One is that a lot of businesses don't want to believe that their policies are non-inclusive. They believe, and a lot of business leaders believe, that they are not sexist or misogynistic in their policies. That's the first barrier, is kind of acknowledging that, again, equality doesn't mean not acknowledging difference, right? So they say, oh, we treat everybody equally. There's one policy. The policy is the same for everyone. And they don't understand that, you know, maybe providing daycare within the company might actually help them retain members of their team that are women who at some point are going to have added pressure to maybe have to take care of the kids back home, right? Or the second barrier is essentially the idea that financially this might be restrictive to the business. It might be difficult and expensive to implement these policies. What I think traditional industry needs to acknowledge is that times are changing, and productivity does not mean working 14-hour days and exhausting yourself. Nowadays, productivity really comes from a work-life balance across genders. So being able to acknowledge that people need enough sleep and that people need to be able to have enough personal time that they can feel recharged and motivated, so that if they are in the office for 8 hours, they're as productive as they possibly can be at that time.
The summary of all this is, in the last 5 to 10 years, one of the key success factors behind any company is a strong culture. 10 years ago, that wasn't the case. You could have a good product, a bad culture, but still succeed. These days, you cannot succeed as a business without having a very, very strong culture.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it is impossible to build a strong culture when half the population of the country you live in is not represented or empowered. It's just straightforward. I think that's the benefit of that, building a very healthy culture on the product and the business overall. Sometimes there are situations where you believe in something, but you need more of a change of mindset to be able to know what you can do to make the change. I went through that process, like Snap focusing so much on gender equality and other diversity topics. By the time I realized how my own mindset is changing, even though I always believed in equality, but I was aware of so many things I could do. I was aware of so many things I shouldn't do. And this gets me to the topic of changing mindsets and how storytelling helps a lot in making sure that people kind of looking at stories and realizing like, oh my God, I've been doing this, or I've been in that system before, even though I believe in it. First, tell me why you chose to zoom into storytelling as a tool to change mindset and make a difference. And then from there, I would love to know some of those really impactful stories that you were part of or you created.
Yeah, that's my favorite part. I love talking about this because storytelling, I think, is one of the most kind of primal human habits, right? Since we've all been sitting around fires, you know, thousands and millions of years ago, we've been telling stories. And it's something that really caters to the deepest part of our humanity. And very often, the power of storytelling is dismissed. It's dismissed as entertainment or as kind of time-wasting endeavors. But when you really look at it, we start our lives and start our days with storytelling. So at WOMENA, what we realized over the course of kind of our evolution was that we might have created a network for investors, and that was impactful. We might have done an accelerator for startups and passed on knowledge and connections, and that was impactful. But the most impactful part of anything that we were doing was the stories that came out of these efforts. So our accelerator, Momentum, which ran for 3 years, had a documentary series attached to it. And the best example is that the community that grew from watching that content, from connecting with the founders that were featured in that content. You know, it wasn't a marketing play. It was really telling the stories of these individuals and who they were and why they were doing what they were doing and the conflicts and struggles and successes that they were facing. People's mindsets changed. You know, a great example is one of the founders in our program in the second year said that before coming into the accelerator, before the content came out of the accelerator, right? Before the story, her story was told, she would get meetings with investors where she was, you know, maybe it felt like a courtesy meeting, or she was seen as another inclusion and gender equality kind of obligation. But now she was in meetings where people were genuinely engaged with her, and she felt like she was being seen as human, which is so crazy to hear that because we made a video or a series of videos that you're included in, now you feel more human, which is kind of the deepest part of who you are. And that's so touching. That kind of motivates us more. We got a letter from a young woman from Jordan who was in MIT and was able to convince her family to let her study in MIT in Boston, to the first person in her family to go outside the country for school because of that series, because she was able to show them, look at what other women are doing in the region. Look at what they're accomplishing. I'm not crazy for wanting to be in tech. I'm not crazy for having this skill. And actually, I can have a future that is celebrated.
That's amazing.
If I follow this.
One thing, I read about your partnership with Boston Consulting Group around measuring the impact of what WOMENA does. And this is really interesting. How do you measure the impact of storytelling around women and diversity and equality? It's something we're really proud of, and we're really excited that we were able to work with Boston Consulting Group to measure that social impact. Essentially, most of the industry measures impact through views, engagement, and impressions, and that's about it. But at WOMENA, we want to take it a step further, because when we talk about stories that inspire change, it's not a fluffy tagline, you know? It's actual, measurable, tangible change. And I don't want to work for something that's fluffy. I want to work for something that actually makes a difference in the world. So we were able to develop with them, with Boston Consulting Group, this very customized kind of tech backend that essentially measures starting at views, impressions, followers, and so on, but follows the change happening and the ripples of change happening in our audience and in our communities, so that we can actually say, this business was started after this person watched this video. That's amazing. So the bigger our audience gets, the more engaged they are, the more content we produce, we actually are able to follow that funnel and timeline towards a positive change in society. And as far as we know, there aren't other companies that put that many resources towards actually measuring that change. This is such a cool conversation. I could go on. I have a million questions on my mind, but we're on time. Thank you so much for this really great conversation. Thank you. And best of luck. And we'll be looking for what you're doing. Thank you so much for being with us today, and have a great day.
Bye.
I've heard once that you reach the ultimate freedom when you stop searching for freedom. And we are all still searching for freedom.
That importance of choice stems to everything in our lives.
You're changing a generation
with this platform. Who am I to tell you what your freedom is? Your freedom can look completely different to my freedom, right? I might not want your freedom. I might not want any part of it.